Those who work in law enforcement, how often do people try to turn themselves in for something that isn't a crime, and what's the most memorable one? So when I was like 8, I stole a pebble from a fish tank. You know those multicolored tiny gravel chunks? I stole a bright orange one. I reached right in the fish tank, grabbed the tiniest one I could find, like 1/10th the size of a penny, and put it up my nose. I got all the way out of the pet store before I just started bawling. My mom asks me what's wrong. I tell her I have to talk to a clerk. We go back inside. I pull a tiny orange pebble out of my nose and hand it to him, or try to. He doesn't exactly take it. I confess I stole it and ask to go to jail now. Yep, that's my big crime. I actually work in law enforcement. There is only once that someone turned themselves in. I was at the front desk when a little girl, couldn't have been older than 8, walked in crying hysterically. She was all scrapped up and dirt and some blood on her clothes. All she said for the first few minutes was, "I didn't mean to. I killed him. I don't wanna be behind bars." She hit a squirrel while riding her bike. She was dirty because she went over her bike and skidded on concrete and grass. Adults don't turn themselves in, they get caught. That's really morbidly adorable. I was 11 or 12 visiting a local coffee shop that roasted their own beans with my parents during a bike ride down the greenbelt near our home. For some reason, I just had to have a coffee bean that was drying on the roasting rack, so I took it and stuck it in my pocket without anyone noticing. I was wearing those tiny pocketed jean shorts that were also popular in the early 2000s, and as I went to mount my bike, the coffee bean fell out of my pocket and clattered to the ground. My parents noticed, and after a teary confession from me, flagged down a police officer nearby and had him explain to me why theft is wrong and almost put me in handcuffs to teach me a lesson. After my parents were satisfied that I had learned from the experience, and forced me to march right up to the counter and wait in line to return the single bean, the cop leaned in close and whispered, "Don't worry, kid. Everyone makes mistakes. Even though your parents are uptight, at least they care. Not everyone is so lucky," ruffled my helmet hair and went on his way. To this day, I wish I could thank him for one of the most valuable life lessons ever, even though I didn't fully understand till much later. I was a boarding officer in the Coast Guard. We were doing recreational boat boardings around Catalina Island. Mostly educational safety boardings, but always looking for smugglers. Stopped a small boat just to do a safety inspection and informed them of the small craft advisory. I jumped on board first, and before I could say a word, an 8-year-old boy thrusts his hands out at me for handcuffs and cries, "I'm sorry, officer. Grandpa told me it was okay if I had one. Please don't hurt him. His grandfather had let him drink one of his O'Dowels. We told the kid it was our little secret." "You said you would keep it a secret." I work in dispatch. One night 2 girls, they were in their early 20s, walked in saying they needed to go to jail. They said that they got into a fight earlier and felt like they needed to be punished. I was dumbfounded. I keep asking these girls if they were serious. They were. So I call an officer down, he talks to them, and about 10 minutes they are walking out in handcuffs. I later talked to that same officer and he told me the girls were trying to smuggle weed to their girlfriends that were in jail. Rarely, but if it does happen, it's usually a parent turning their kid in. More often than not, we have to deal with the crazies who want to press charges on someone for something that isn't a crime, or trying to drop a felony charge on a person who tried to run them over with a car or something. Pro tip: you can't just make a felony charge go away. If you make a statement to the cops that someone tried to kill you, they will arrest that person if they find them. I accidentally threw a frisbee through a 150-year-old, 6 feet wide decorative window. I called the cops expecting to pay money or something. They showed up and just said thank you for being honest. They said they were really impressed with me, but the truth is my name and phone number were on the disc. This can't be much lamer than some of the other stories on here. I used to work at a bottle store. Once, a homeless person, a regular, came to me and offered to exchange his brand new bike for a bottle of vodka. Clearly, it wasn't his bike, so I said yes, thinking of taking the bike to the police so that someone could get their bike back. After work, I took it to the police station and explained the situation to the cop, and she told me that she was going to charge me with receiving stolen property. I spoke to her sergeant, who told her she was a loser, and he thanked me for helping. I still find it entertaining that other countries call them bottle stores, like they only sell bottles or something. IDK, it doesn't take much to amuse me. Someone I know, who was 16 at the time, set a bag of crap on fire and rang a doorbell. The guy stomped it out. You know how it goes. I suppose the kid felt bad since it was an old man and turned himself in. The cops have seen this kid at the local hangout spot in front of a convenience store, so they told him to be at the store noon the next Saturday to pick up trash and cigarette butts in the parking lot. When he was done, they thanked him for being honest and said, "Don't be an idiot. You could burn someone's house down all because of a bag of crap." He called the crap crap. My manic depressive friend once turned himself into the police because he thought that he was ripping off Social Security. Keep in mind that he had been up for 3 days by that time. Anyways, he did get thrown off of Social Security. My manic depressive friend, an ex-combat Marine, discovered a dope dealer's house upon giving a ride to her home. He called the cops and asked where to stack the bodies, because he was going to clean them out permanent. Just doing his civic duty, don't you know? He had to spend a few days in the nut house. It wasn't a non-crime, but it was a memorable turn-in for me. I had an offender, I worked probation, who had several outstanding misdemeanor warrants for B&E, assault on female, and larceny. I was trying to convince him to come to the office so I could have the warrants served. He refused and told me he knew he had warrants. He said, "Just give me to the 18th. Just give me a week." I said no, he needed to come in immediately. He of course refused. He was a pathological liar for all the time I knew him. Heavy drug user, lied about everything and anything. Excuse after excuse after excuse. Lo and behold, on the 18th I get an alert on my computer that he had been booked at the county jail. Just like he said he would. No one ever does that. Cop for 15 years. Never had anyone turn themselves in for something that's not a crime. Much more common to have people jump up and down to the point of rabbit frothing mouth anger wanting someone they know arrested for something that isn't a crime. Just to give an example before I am asked, had a lady who wanted me to arrest her neighbors because every time she would go outside they would make fun of her to each other on their porch. She said they were saying things that weren't true about her to each other and she demanded I arrest them for slander. I work in immigration and usually during the holidays we will get illegals that turn themselves in for a free ride back to their country of birth. Suitcases and all. I'm from a small town. There was a homeless guy, by choice, who would steal stuff on cold nights just so he could spend the night in a warm jail cell. In the end the police would just tell him to take the property back and let him sleep in the station. This was back in the 50s and 60s. Barney was a good cop. My great-grandfather was an illegal immigrant. He was an orphan in Britain, so the moment he turned 16 he was discharged from the orphanage and enrolled in the merchant navy. He was seasick the entire time and so jumped ship when it came at Sydney. He hid out in Hyde Park until it left. He got a job, raised a family, but his past sins weighed heavily on his mind. When he was in his 70s he finally decided to do the right thing. He packed his bag, kissed his wife goodbye and turned himself to the police. When he explained it all, the police just asked, "Are you going to do it again?" "No." "Then go home." Nobody cared. It had weighed heavily on his mind for his entire life, but nobody wanted to punish him for it. Someone once tried to turn themselves in because they thought they'd have a warrant after a sexual harassment complaint at their work. I don't think he grasped the concept of civil versus criminal law. Well, maybe he thought he'd be arrested for sexual assault. No idea what he did, but it can go from civil to criminal pretty fast. I worked in a public defender's office. Once had a client whose dad turned him in for smoking pot because he found a pipe in his room. The kid insisted that he was clean in the police report, but the dad, a cop, wouldn't hear any of it because he insisted that he knew what marijuana smelled like. We got the case dismissed after the pipe tested negative for all illegal substances. A mom once had her kid come up to me while I was working security for a store, and he told me to take him to jail for stealing. Apparently the boy had stolen a pack of trading cards, or attempted to, and the mom found out and convinced him he was going to jail. When I was about 5 or 6, I was in Bed Bath & Beyond and found a river stone on the floor. There were bags of them nearby, and it had fallen out. We got home and it fell out of my pocket in front of my mom. She told me that we were going back to the store so that she could turn me in and the police were going to take me away and put me in jail. Being very young, it scared the crap out of me. I was crying hysterically for well over an hour. I told a clerk, through my increasingly panicked sobs, that I had taken the stone, and instead of sending me to jail, obviously, he told me that it was okay and let me keep the stone. On the way out my mom made me throw the stone into some bushes. Well, she had to drill in the lesson that stealing was bad sometime. Best time is when you're an impressionable young kid, letting you know you can get in trouble for even the smallest things. But then again, I don't know your mom. She could actually be bat crap crazy. When I was a rookie patrolman, a teenager flagged my car down and confessed to accidentally running over a cat with his moped. He put his hands on the hood of my car and asked how much time he would get for animal cruelty. He was actually really shaken up. I felt really bad for him. I explained that as long as he didn't do it on purpose it wasn't a crime and gave him a ride home with the moped half hanging out of my trunk. I also once had an elderly woman come in with her grandson and ask us to arrest him because he was committing sexual abuse. When we asked her who he was abusing, she answered himself. She caught him jerking off and tried to get him arrested for it. If masturbation was illegal, this site would get like 3 hits. When I was like 6 years old, I saw one of those Reese's Crunchy cookie cups at the supermarket. I know, awesome, right? I ask my dad if he'll get me one, because come on, you can't just not try for the cookie cup. And he says no, not today. I persist, but dad won't yield. Using my brain, I decide to sneak one under my shirt and try to smuggle it all the way out to the car. As we're leaving, though, my dad hears the wrapper rustling under my shirt, yells at me, and orders me to go bring it back to the cashier. That was the scariest crap in the entire world. I didn't just know I was going to jail. I could see it. It was right there. Must have been a pretty awkward time for that pubescent cashier guy, trying to pretend like he gave a crap about whether I stole a Reese's cup to help my dad teach me a lesson. And goddamn did it work. I couldn't steal something if I wanted to these days. A little late to this party, but here goes. I've been a dispatcher for 10 years. People rarely turn themselves in, but they are always trying to get other people arrested for non-crimes. And they can be amazingly indignant and angry about these things. 1. My neighbor's sprinkler is getting water on my grass. 2. My pizza toppings are wrong. 3. Another driver took the spot I was waiting for at the gas pump. 4. My 6-year-old is not doing what he is told. 5. The car in front of me is going 5 miles per hour slower than the speed limit, and this person screaming so hysterically about it you could barely understand them. And of course, the classic. 6. There's a black guy walking down the street in my neighborhood, unable to explain what is suspicious about this person, other than skin color, etc, etc. People are whiny crybabies. I'll tell my story of turning myself in, that is pretty memorable and hilarious. I was visiting my friend's cabin where her and her mother live. At the age of 20, it was deemed acceptable by her mother that we, my friends and I, drink alcohol. My parents also have no problem with me drinking, as long as I am in a safe environment. So my friend and her mom were gone all day working and left us alone in the cabin. The other person who drove up with me, we'll call him Carl, and I proceeded to have beers throughout the day, stopping by the lake and then watching TV. My friend's mom gets home and she is in a huge panic. She says she got a ride home from her co-worker's boyfriend, who was a state trooper, and that they were coming inside for drinks and we needed to clean up now. There were beer bottles pretty much everywhere from the weekend, so cleaning up was a bust. He walks in the door, and we hide our beers under blankets. He was being a real dong, and asking us questions about how old we were, if we had been drinking, if he should believe us, and if our friend's mom condoned it. Then he walked into another room in earshot and talked to my friend's mom. He was telling her how he had to report it, and that she could lose the house and get in huge trouble for assisting the abuse of minors by providing them alcohol and blah blah blah. We clean up and hide our beers and are completely panicked. He eventually says he will hang out and see to it that we aren't drinking. He proceeds to down a few beers over an hour or so, and suddenly his radio goes off. He needs to get somewhere now, and can't drive because he drank. So guess who he asks to drive? That is right, Cole and I immediately say I don't feel comfortable enough to drive, and I am going to bed soon. BS excuses. The officer is freaking out insisting that we drive, and Carl decides he is sober enough, only had about 5 beers and hadn't drank the past hour, to drive to the fire. Well, he didn't want to drive, but the officer made it sound like innocent people were dying in a fire and he needed to get there immediately, so Cole made an impulse decision. We get in the car and the officer asks if we know anything about DUI laws. We immediately start pleading and begging and apologizing, saying we didn't want our friend's mom in trouble. We pretty much thought Cole was getting a DUI and that I would get a drinking ticket and my friend's mom would be screwed. Then out come everyone from the cabin laughing their asses off, and the cop starts laughing hard too, and pulls out some beers and hands them to us. We all step out and laugh about it, and go on to enjoy a fun night of drinking with a good guy cop. You have been visited by the wall doggo. Subscribe to Updoot Reddit and you will have good luck for 2 weeks. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.